This is the chronicle of one of the most obscure and troubling chapters in the criminal history of the remote Tennessee highlands during the Reconstruction era. What commenced as an unremarkable autumn assembly of devout families in 1869 rapidly devolved into a series of events so horrific that local officials attempted to expunge it from every formal record for over a century. The true nature of the events at the Harper Homestead remained concealed beneath layers of bureaucratic silence and deliberate destruction of evidence. Before we proceed, I would encourage you to press the like button if you appreciate thorough explorations of forgotten historical enigmas. The Lydia Harper affair is not merely an unsolved tragedy. It serves as a testament to the limits of rational thought when confronted with occurrences that defy every conventional understanding of human behavior and natural order. In the autumn of 1869, Carter County, Tennessee, was a region still recovering from the devastation of the Civil War. The mountainous terrain of the Appalachian foothills had long isolated communities, creating insular pockets of society with their own distinct customs, beliefs, and moral frameworks, largely detached from the broader currents of American culture. The Harper family had established themselves in a valley roughly 14 miles northeast of Elizabethton in 1847. Jeremiah Harper, a stonemason by trade, had constructed a substantial two-story farmhouse from local limestone, notable for its peculiar architectural features, including a root cellar that extended nearly 20 feet beneath the main structure. By 1869, Jeremiah had passed away, bequeathing the property to his widow, Lydia Harper, then 43 years old. Lydia had become a respected figure in the scattered community, known for her literacy and her practice of hosting prayer meetings and scripture readings for neighboring families. According to census records from 1870, compiled by Deputy Marshal Thomas Wickham, the nearest neighbor to the Harper residence lived 1.7 miles away, underscoring the extreme isolation of the homestead. On October 12, 1869, 23 individuals gathered at the Harper home for what surviving letters describe as a harvest, Thanksgiving, and prayer vigil. The group comprised 7 families from the surrounding hills, with ages ranging from 4 months to 61 years. Among them were Reverend Amos Blackwell, who had traveled from Elizabethton specifically for the occasion, and Dr. Samuel Pritchard, the only physician serving the mountain communities within a 20-mile radius. By October 14, 1869, 14 of those 23 people had vanished without a trace. The 9 survivors were discovered in states of profound psychological shock, unable or unwilling to provide coherent accounts of what had transpired during those 48 hours. Something occurred within that limestone house, something that authorities spent decades trying to erase from public memory. The most comprehensive record of the events leading up to the gathering comes from a diary kept by Reverend Amos Blackwell, discovered in 1967 among materials donated to the East Tennessee Historical Society. The final entries, dated October 11 and 12, 1869, offer our most detailed glimpse into the hours preceding the incident. Blackwell noted that he arrived at the Harper residence around 2 in the afternoon on October 12. He described the property as tidy, with recent harvests of squash, beans, and corn visible in the yard. Lydia Harper greeted him warmly and escorted him to a guest room on the 2nd floor, where he would stay overnight before leading morning prayers. By evening, according to Blackwell's account, all 23 participants had arrived. He recorded their names with meticulous care, a practice that would later prove invaluable for investigators. The Reverend observed that Lydia Harper appeared to be in high spirits, though he noted she had arranged the main gathering room in an unusual manner, with chairs placed in a perfect circle rather than the rows typically used for prayer meetings. Dinner was served at 7 o'clock. Multiple survivors would later recall in fragmented statements that the meal included venison, preserved vegetables, cornbread, and apple preserves. Nothing about the food or drink seemed out of the ordinary at the time. According to a statement given by survivor Martha Caldwell on October 20, 1869, and preserved in the Carter County Courthouse archives, the prayer vigil commenced around 1830 in the evening. Lydia Harper began with a reading from the Book of Revelation, chapter 20, verses 1 through 3. Martha recalled that Lydia's voice sounded different, deeper than usual, though she attributed this to the room's acoustics. What transpired next remains a matter of contention among the survivors, with accounts differing so greatly that early investigators suspected deliberate deception. However, psychiatric evaluations conducted in 1870 by Dr. Horace Dooner of Nashville suggested that the survivors genuinely believed their own testimonies, despite the inconsistencies. Survivor Jacob Yancey, aged 19, told Sheriff Coleman Briggs that about an hour into the vigil, Lydia Harper began speaking in what he termed an unknown language. His written statement, dated October 16, 1869, specified that the sounds were unlike any European or Native American language he had ever encountered. Other survivors, however, insisted that Lydia continued speaking English throughout the evening. The first disappearance occurred around 10 o'clock. According to testimony from survivor Elizabeth Pritchard, wife of Dr. Samuel Pritchard, her husband excused himself to retrieve his medical bag from his wagon because one of the young children had developed a fever. Dr. Pritchard never returned to the house. His medical bag was later discovered in the root cellar, though his body was not. Records from the subsequent investigation indicate that no one initially noticed the physician's absence. Survivor testimony suggests a strange mental fog had descended upon the gathering, with participants later describing a dreamlike quality to their memories of the evening. According to documents housed in the Tennessee State Library and Archives, survivor Ann Hutchkins testified that she realized something was amiss when she noticed her two children, aged 6 and 8, were no longer in the room. She stated that she rose to look for them, but Lydia Harper ordered her to sit, and she found herself unable to refuse. Ann Hutchkins described feeling as though invisible hands pressed down on her shoulders, forcing her back into her chair. The most disturbing testimony comes from Reverend Blackwell's own statement, given on October 18, 1869, just 6 days before his sudden death from what the coroner listed as heart failure. Blackwell stated that around 11 o'clock, he observed Lydia Harper rise from her chair and walk to the door leading to the root cellar. He described her movements as mechanical, devoid of natural human fluidity. According to his testimony, 13 people stood and followed her in single file, including his own wife, Catherine Blackwell. The Reverend claimed he attempted to follow, but found himself physically incapable of moving from his chair. He described hearing a door close, followed by total silence. Those who remained in the room sat motionless, according to his account, for a period he estimated at 3 to 4 hours, though he admitted that his sense of time had become unreliable. Martha Caldwell's testimony supports portions of Blackwell's story, but adds a critical detail. She stated that during the hours of waiting, she could hear sounds emanating from beneath the house. She described these as resembling rhythmic knocking, followed by what she believed to be singing, though the tune was unfamiliar and deeply unsettling. Her written statement includes the phrase, "It was as if the earth itself had learned to sing, and the song was not meant for human ears." At some point before dawn, according to multiple survivor accounts, those who had descended into the root cellar began to return. However, not all of them came back. Survivor stories vary wildly about which individuals returned and in what state. Jacob Yancey testified that only 3 people emerged from the cellar, but he could not identify them because their faces were obscured by their hands. Elizabeth Pritchard insisted that all 13 returned, but that several seemed different in ways she could not explain. Anne Hutchkins stated that her children returned, but they would not speak to her and refused to acknowledge her presence. The most troubling aspect of the survivor testimonies involves Lydia Harper herself. According to Sheriff Briggs's investigation report dated November 3, 1869, every survivor agreed on one detail. Lydia Harper did not return from the root cellar. Yet somehow, after the mysterious events of the evening, Lydia Harper stood in the main room and dismissed the gathering, instructing everyone to return to their homes. Dawn broke on October 13, 1869. According to the survivors, they found themselves outside the Harper residence, standing in the yard. None could recall leaving the house. Their wagons and horses were exactly as they had left them. The front door of the house stood open. Reverend Blackwell, in his final testimony before his death, stated that he insisted on entering the house to search for those who had not emerged. What he found in the main gathering room defied explanation. The chairs remained arranged in their perfect circle. On each chair where a missing person had sat, he found a single item of their clothing neatly folded. Nothing else remained. The root cellar door was closed. When Jacob Yancey and another survivor forced it open, they found the cellar empty except for stored provisions. There was no other exit. The limestone walls showed no signs of disturbance, yet 14 people had vanished. Sheriff Coleman Briggs arrived at the Harper property on the afternoon of October 13, responding to reports from the frantic survivors. His initial investigation report, kept in the Carter County Archives, describes his search of the premises. He found no evidence of violence, no bloodstains, no signs of a struggle. The house appeared completely normal, except for one detail. Every mirror in the residence had been covered with black cloth. The sheriff's report notes that he descended into the root cellar with 2 deputies. They found nothing unusual except for a smell that Briggs described as similar to burning sulfur, though no fire had been lit. More disturbingly, he noted that the packed earth floor of the cellar showed no footprints. Despite the recent traffic the survivors had described, the most inexplicable discovery came on October 15, when a search party led by Deputy Marshal Thomas Wickham combed the woods surrounding the Harper property. About half a mile from the house, searchers found a circle of disturbed earth roughly 30 feet in diameter. Within this circle, they discovered 7 items of clothing belonging to the missing individuals. The clothing was arranged in a radial pattern, as if the wearers had stood facing outward and then simply vanished, leaving only their garments behind. No bodies were ever recovered. No trace of the 14 missing individuals was ever found beyond those scattered pieces of clothing. And Lydia Harper herself had disappeared, though legally she remained the owner of the property until her death was declared in absentia in 1876. Sheriff Coleman Briggs's investigation into the Harper incident lasted from October 13 through December 22, 1869. Documents preserved in the Carter County Courthouse reveal an increasingly frantic attempt to construct a rational explanation for events that seem to resist all logical interpretation. Briggs's initial theory, recorded in his report dated October 16, 1869, proposed that the missing individuals had fled into the wilderness, possibly suffering from collective poisoning or intoxication. He suspected that Lydia Harper had somehow tampered with the evening meal using a hallucinogenic substance, though he could not establish a motive. Dr. Horace Dunner, called from Nashville to examine the survivors, found no evidence of poisoning in their systems when he conducted examinations on October 19 and 20. The sheriff organized search parties that scoured a radius of 15 miles around the Harper property. According to ledgers kept by Deputy Marshal Wickham, a total of 73 men participated in these searches over a 6-week period. They found nothing beyond the clothing discovered on October 15. On October 21, 1869, Sheriff Briggs made the decision to excavate the root cellar floor. His report describes the process in meticulous detail. Workers removed packed earth to a depth of 6 feet across the entire cellar space. They discovered no hidden chambers, no bodies, no evidence of tunneling. The limestone bedrock beneath the cellar showed no signs of disturbance. The excavation revealed only one item of interest: a small leather-bound book buried about 3 feet below the surface, wrapped in oilcloth to protect it from moisture. This book, currently housed in the restricted collections of the Tennessee State Library and Archives under accession number TSL 1869HC047, became the most controversial piece of evidence in the case. According to the inventory conducted by state archivist Margaret Bellingham in 1891, the book contains 147 pages of handwritten text in multiple languages, including English, Latin, and what experts later identified as corrupted medieval German. Sheriff Briggs's report indicates that he confiscated the book immediately and sent it to Reverend Thomas Whitmore in Knoxville for examination. Whitmore's response, dated November 2, 1869, and preserved in the archives of the First Presbyterian Church of Knoxville, expressed profound alarm. The Reverend wrote that the text contained blasphemous rituals and invocations of a nature so disturbing that he could not in good conscience provide a detailed translation. He recommended that the book be destroyed immediately. The book was not destroyed. Instead, it became a source of intense dispute among investigators and clergy members who examined it. Dr. Hinrich Vogel, a professor of ancient languages at the University of Tennessee, conducted an analysis in November 1869. His report, discovered among his personal papers in 1982, stated that portions of the text described a ritual intended to open doorways between the realm of flesh and the realm of eternal darkness. Vogel noted that the handwriting appeared to be Lydia Harper's, based on comparison with known samples of her correspondence. While the physical investigation stalled, Sheriff Briggs attempted to construct a psychological profile of Lydia Harper by interviewing neighbors and acquaintances. Testimony collected between October and December 1869 painted a contradictory picture. Margaret Simmons, a neighbor who lived about 2 miles from the Harper property, testified on October 24 that Lydia had always been a devout Christian woman who showed no signs of instability or unusual beliefs. However, Simmons noted that in the months leading up to the incident, Lydia had begun asking strange questions about the nature of death and the possibility of communicating with deceased individuals. More troubling testimony came from Thomas Garver, a traveling merchant who had visited the Harper residence in September 1869. In his statement dated November 1, Garver reported that he had observed Lydia speaking to someone in the root cellar, though when he inquired, she insisted she was alone. He described hearing a second voice responding to her, though he could not determine its source. Garver stated that the voice was neither male nor female and seemed to emanate from the walls themselves. The investigation took a darker turn on November 8, 1869, when one of the survivors, Ann Hutchkins, was found dead in her home. The official cause of death, recorded by Dr. Samuel Morton, who had replaced the missing Dr. Pritchard, was listed as suicide by hanging. However, Ann's husband, Robert Hutchkins, contested this finding. In a statement given to Deputy Marshal Wickham on November 10, Robert insisted that his wife had been in good spirits the evening before her death and had expressed no suicidal thoughts. More disturbing was Robert's claim that on the night of her death, he had heard Anne speaking to someone in their bedroom. When he entered, he found her alone, standing at the window and staring into the darkness, according to his testimony. When he asked whom she had been talking to, Anne replied, "She's come back for the rest of us. She says we didn't finish what we started." Reverend Amos Blackwell's death on October 24, 1869, further complicated the investigation. The official cause was listed as heart failure, but the circumstances raised questions. According to a report from Dr. Morton, Blackwell had been found in his study, seated at his desk with his journal open before him. The final entry, dated October 24, consisted of a single sentence written repeatedly down the entire page. "They are not gone. They are underneath." 2 more survivors died under questionable circumstances before the year ended. Jacob Yancey was found deceased in the woods near his home on December 3, 1869. The cause of death was listed as exposure, though temperatures had been mild for early December. Elizabeth Pritchard disappeared entirely on December 15, 1869, leaving behind a note that read simply, "I must return to the house. She is calling." Elizabeth's body was never found, though a search party discovered her shawl hanging from a tree branch, about 100 yards from the Harper property. The shawl had been tied in an elaborate knot that none of the searchers could identify or replicate. By late December, Sheriff Briggs faced mounting pressure from county officials to close the investigation. According to minutes from a county commission meeting on December 18, 1869, preserved in the courthouse archives, Commissioner Albert Ross argued that the continuing investigation was damaging the county's reputation and deterring potential settlers. He proposed that the missing individuals be declared victims of a tragic accident, possibly a cave collapse or flash flood, despite the complete absence of evidence supporting such conclusions. Sheriff Briggs resisted this pressure, but his position became untenable following an incident on December 20. According to his final report dated December 22, Briggs decided to spend a night in the Harper house with 2 deputies, hoping that darkness might reveal something the daytime searches had missed. The sheriff's account of that night is fragmentary and difficult to interpret. He reported that around midnight, all 3 men heard sounds coming from the root cellar, despite the fact that they had sealed it with boards and nails. Briggs described the sounds as rhythmic knocking, precisely as the survivors had described, followed by a low humming that seemed to vibrate through the stone foundation of the house. When the men investigated, they found the cellar door still sealed. Yet Briggs insisted that the sounds had been real, not imagined. More disturbingly, he reported that when they attempted to leave the house, they found themselves momentarily disoriented, unable to locate the front door despite standing in the main room. The confusion lasted only seconds, but all 3 men experienced it simultaneously. In his final report, Sheriff Briggs concluded that forces beyond the understanding of conventional law enforcement were at work in the Harper case. He recommended that the property be condemned and the house destroyed. He also suggested that surviving witnesses be relocated away from Carter County for their own safety. The county commission rejected these recommendations. On December 28, 1869, they voted to officially close the investigation. The 14 missing persons were declared deceased, victims of an unspecified accident. No further inquiries were authorized. The Harper property remained standing, but was never occupied again. According to property records in the Carter County Register of Deeds office, the land reverted to the county in 1876 when Lydia Harper was declared legally dead. Multiple attempts to auction the property in subsequent decades failed to attract buyers. The most significant suppression of evidence occurred in January 1870, when County Commissioner Ross ordered that all physical evidence related to the case be sealed. The leather-bound book discovered in the root cellar was transferred to state custody, with instructions that it remain inaccessible without specific authorization. Witness testimonies were filed under restricted access. Even newspaper coverage of the incident was actively discouraged. The Elizabethton Star, the primary newspaper serving Carter County, published only 2 brief articles about the incident, both in October 1869. The first, dated October 17, mentioned only that several persons were missing following a gathering in the northern hills. The second, dated October 28, stated that the unfortunate incident in the Harper district had been resolved and authorities reported no cause for public concern. No further coverage appeared. This deliberate suppression succeeded in removing the Harper case from public memory. By 1880, only a decade after the incident, few residents of Carter County could provide detailed accounts of what had occurred. The case became a vague local legend, stripped of its specific details, and relegated to the category of mountain superstition. The 9 survivors who remained alive entered a pact of silence. According to a letter written by Martha Caldwell in 1891, discovered among her personal effects after her death in 1903, the survivors agreed never to speak of the incident again. She wrote, "We have seen what lies beneath the surface of God's good earth, and we know that some doors once opened can never truly be closed. Our silence is not cowardice, but wisdom. Let the dead remain buried, even if they are not dead, and even if they are not buried." The Harper case remained in obscurity until 1967, when Dr. Robert Thorne, an assistant professor of American history at Vanderbilt University, stumbled upon a reference to it while researching post-Civil War violence in Appalachia. The reference appeared in a footnote in an 1889 medical journal article about mass hysteria written by Dr. Horace Dooner, decades after his involvement in the case. Dr. Thorne's initial interest was academic but detached. According to his research notes, donated to the Vanderbilt University Special Collections after his disappearance in 1971, he expected to find a case of collective delusion, or perhaps a covered-up multiple homicide. What he discovered instead consumed the final 4 years of his life. Thorne began his investigation in the Tennessee State Library and Archives in January 1968. In a letter to his colleague, Dr. Patricia Morrison, dated February 3, 1968, he wrote, "I found the preliminary case files, and Pat, nothing about this adds up. 14 people vanished from a locked house, with no exits except the door. And the official investigation simply stops with no resolution. The surviving witnesses all died within 3 years, most under suspicious circumstances. This isn't mass hysteria. This is something else entirely." Thorne's research methodology was exhaustive. He obtained access to the restricted witness testimonies through a special petition to the state archivist. He traveled to Carter County and interviewed descendants of the survivors and investigators. He examined property records, census data, church registries, and personal correspondence from the period. His annotated bibliography, compiled in October 1968, lists over 300 primary sources. The breakthrough came in March 1969, when Thorne gained access to the leather-bound book discovered in the Harper root cellar. According to his research journal entry dated March 17, 1969, he spent 6 hours examining the book in the controlled access reading room of the state archives. He photographed every page, despite regulations limiting photography of restricted materials. Thorne's translation of portions of the book, completed with assistance from Dr. Klaus Mendelssohn, a professor of medieval studies at Duke University, revealed content that both scholars found deeply disturbing. In a confidential memo to the archive director dated April 2, 1969, Dr. Mendelsohn wrote, "The text Dr. Thorne has shared with me appears to be a genuine 18th or early 19th century grimoire focused on rituals of necromantic summoning. The instructions are specific and detailed, suggesting the author believed these practices to be functional rather than symbolic. I strongly advise that this material remain restricted." According to Thorne's notes, the book contained detailed instructions for a ritual described as the opening of the threshold. The ritual allegedly required a specific number of participants arranged in a circle and was to be conducted in a location where the boundary between realms grows thin. The text promised that successful completion would grant the practitioner dominion over those who dwell in shadow and passage between the world of flesh and the world of eternal night. Thorne became convinced that Lydia Harper had attempted this ritual on October 12, 1869. His hypothesis, outlined in an unpublished manuscript found among his papers, proposed that Harper had spent years preparing for the event. She had deliberately positioned herself as a religious figure in the community to attract participants. She had constructed or modified the root cellar to serve as a ritual space. She had studied the grimoire extensively and believed genuinely in its promises. But Thorne's research led him to a more disturbing conclusion. The ritual had worked. In his journal entry from June 23, 1969, Thorne wrote, "I can no longer maintain scholarly objectivity. The evidence suggests that something genuinely supernatural occurred in that house. The disappearances cannot be explained by conventional means. The physical evidence defies natural law, and the testimonies, when examined without prejudice, describe an encounter with something outside human experience." Thorne's investigation took a dramatic turn in August 1969, when he decided to visit the Harper property itself. The land remained county property, unused and largely forgotten. The house still stood, though in severe disrepair. According to his journal, Thorne obtained permission from county officials to conduct an archaeological survey of the site. He arrived at the property on August 14, 1969, accompanied by 2 graduate students, Michael Chen and Sarah Duval. Thorne's notes from that day describe a structure in advanced decay. The roof had partially collapsed, walls showed extensive water damage, and vegetation had begun to reclaim the foundation. Yet the basic structure remained intact, including the root cellar. The team spent 3 days conducting surface surveys and documenting the site through photographs and measurements. Thorne's notes indicate growing unease among all 3 researchers. On August 15, Sarah Duval recorded in her own journal, "There's something wrong with this place. I know that sounds unscientific, but the atmosphere here is oppressive. We all feel it. Even in bright daylight, the house seems to absorb light rather than reflect it." On August 16, against the advice of both graduate students, Thorne descended into the root cellar. His description of what he found there represents his final coherent journal entry. He reported that the cellar, despite a century of neglect, showed no signs of water infiltration or structural collapse. The limestone walls remained solid and dry. The packed earth floor was undisturbed. But Thorne noticed something that previous investigators had apparently missed or failed to record. On the far wall of the cellar, barely visible beneath accumulated grime, he discovered carved symbols. His photographs of these symbols, developed after his disappearance, show intricate geometric patterns identical to diagrams in Lydia Harper's grimoire. More significantly, Thorne reported feeling a peculiar sensation while in the cellar. In his journal, he wrote, "The temperature is constant throughout the cellar, but there is one spot approximately in the center where I experienced a sudden sensation of vertigo. It lasted only a moment, but it was accompanied by an auditory hallucination. I heard knocking exactly as described in the 1869 testimonies. Michael and Sarah, waiting above, heard nothing. That evening, Thorne made a decision that his colleagues would later characterize as irrational and unscientific. He decided to spend the night alone in the Harper house. Both graduate students protested, but Thorne was insistent. According to Sarah Duval's testimony given to police in September 1969, Thorne said he needed to experience what the survivors experienced to fully understand the case. Michael Chen and Sarah Duval left the property at approximately 6 o'clock on the evening of August 16, with Thorne's promise that he would return to Elizabethton the following morning. He never did. When Thorne failed to appear by noon on August 17, the graduate students returned to the Harper property with local sheriff's deputies. They found Thorne's vehicle parked where he had left it. His camping equipment remained in the main room of the house untouched. His flashlight sat on the floor, still switched on, its battery dead. Robert Thorne himself was gone. The search for Dr. Thorne involved state police, local volunteers, and tracking dogs. They found no trace of him. His body was never recovered. The only evidence of his final hours came from his tape recorder, found in the root cellar. The tape, now held by the Tennessee Bureau of Investigation under evidence number TBI line 9692847, contains approximately 40 minutes of recording. For the first 30 minutes, it captures Thorne speaking notes into the recorder, describing his observations and measurements. His voice is calm and professional. At the 30-minute mark, there is a pause. Then Thorne's voice returns, but changed. According to the transcription prepared by TBI investigators, he says, "There's someone else here. I can hear movement in the cellar. I'm going to investigate." The next sound on the recording is Thorne descending wooden stairs, then silence for approximately 3 minutes. Then a sound described in the official transcription as rhythmic knocking, similar to a heartbeat but irregular. Thorne's voice returns, but now it carries a tone of distress. The door is, there's no door. How did I get down here? Sarah, Michael, can you hear me? The walls they're moving. No, not moving. Breathing. The walls are breathing. What follows is 6 minutes of confused speech. Thorne seems to be responding to someone or something not captured by the microphone. He says,
"Yes, I understand. No, I didn't.
I only wanted, please, I'm a researcher. I don't believe in this. This can't be." Then, clearly and distinctly, Thorne says, "Lydia Harper. You're Lydia Harper, but that's impossible. You've been dead for..." "No, you're not dead. None of them are dead. They're here. All of them. They've been here the whole time. They're underneath. Oh God, they're underneath everything." The final sounds on the tape are difficult to interpret. The official transcription notes, subject screaming, followed by dragging sounds, followed by heavy impact, followed by silence. The tape continues recording silence for approximately 4 more minutes before the device apparently switched off automatically. Analysis of the tape by audio forensic specialists at the FBI laboratory in Quantico yielded disturbing conclusions, according to their report dated November 1969 and obtained through Freedom of Information Act requests in 2003. The recording contains anomalies that the analysts could not explain. During the final minutes, underneath Thorne's voice, the audio spectrum shows patterns consistent with multiple voices speaking simultaneously, though no distinct words can be extracted. The analysts noted that these patterns do not match any known natural phenomenon or recording artifact. The disappearance of Dr. Robert Thorne prompted the Tennessee Bureau of Investigation to seal the Harper property permanently. On September 30, 1969, county officials erected a chain link fence around the entire parcel. Warning signs were posted indicating that trespassing would be prosecuted. The house itself was boarded and locked, though no demolition was undertaken. In October 1969, the state archivist, under pressure from law enforcement, placed additional restrictions on materials related to the Harper case. The leather-bound grimoire was transferred to a secure vault. Access to witness testimonies was further limited. Dr. Thorne's research materials were confiscated from his university office and added to the restricted collection. The official explanation for Thorne's disappearance, offered by the TBI in their final report dated December 1969, proposed that he had become psychologically unstable due to over-identification with his research subject. They suggested he had wandered into the woods, surrounding the property in a state of confusion, and succumbed to exposure or accident. This explanation satisfied neither Thorne's family nor his academic colleagues. Dr. Patricia Morrison, Thorne's colleague at Vanderbilt, attempted to continue his research in 1970. According to her correspondence with the state archivist, she requested access to the same materials Thorne had examined. Her request was denied on the grounds that the materials were pending legal review related to an ongoing investigation. Morrison persisted, filing formal appeals and garnering support from the American Historical Association. Her efforts proved successful in March 1971, when she obtained limited access to Thorne's research notes and photographs, though not to the original restricted documents. Morrison's analysis of Thorne's work, published in a limited circulation academic journal in June 1971, argued that he had uncovered evidence of a genuine historical mystery that warranted further investigation. She concluded, whatever occurred at the Harper residence in 1869 and whatever happened to Dr. Thorne in 1969 cannot be adequately explained by conventional theories of mass delusion, criminal activity, or psychological instability. The documentary evidence suggests an event outside the boundaries of accepted historical phenomena. The article attracted little attention in academic circles, but did generate interest among paranormal researchers and journalists. Several attempted to visit the Harper property in late 1971 and early 1972. All were turned away by local authorities. One journalist, Michael Strand of the Knoxville News-Sentinel, managed to access the property in November 1971 by obtaining temporary permission under the pretense of writing a historical feature about post-Civil War architecture. His article, published on November 28, 1971, and preserved in the newspaper archives, provides the last detailed description of the Harper house before it was destroyed. Strand reported that despite the passage of over a century and evident decay, the house maintained an unsettling presence. He noted the unusual silence around the property. No birds sing near the Harper house. No insects buzz. Even the wind seems to avoid the place. Standing in the yard, I experienced a profound sense of wrongness, as if the very space occupied by the structure exists slightly outside of normal reality. Strand did not enter the house, but photographed it extensively from outside. His photographs show a building that, while deteriorated, retained its basic structural integrity. The root cellar entrance, visible in one photograph, appears as a dark rectangle beneath a partially collapsed porch. The Harper house burned on December 31, 1971. The fire was attributed to vagrant activity, though no vagrants were ever identified or charged. Local fire departments responded but made no serious effort to save the structure. By morning, only the limestone foundation and portions of the walls remained standing. County officials demolished these remnants in February 1972, filling in the root cellar with concrete and rubble. The site was graded level and seeded with grass. According to County Commission minutes from March 1972, this action was taken to eliminate an attractive nuisance and potential liability. Dr. Patricia Morrison disappeared on April 15, 1972. She had informed colleagues that she intended to travel to Carter County to examine the Harper site following its demolition. Her vehicle was found parked at a rest stop approximately 30 miles from Elizabethton. Morrison herself was never seen again. Her disappearance received minimal media coverage and was ultimately classified as a missing person case with no leads. No connection to the Harper investigation was officially acknowledged, though the timing struck her colleagues as grimly significant. The final chapter in the modern investigation of the Harper case belongs to David Keller, a graduate student at the University of Tennessee, who attempted to write his master's thesis on the incident in 1978. Keller's research was less extensive than Thorne's, limited by the increasingly restrictive access to primary materials. However, Keller made one significant discovery. While examining county death records, he identified a pattern that previous researchers had missed. Between 1870 and 1920, 27 individuals who lived within a 5-mile radius of the Harper property died under circumstances officially listed as suicide or accidental death. The rate was approximately 5 times higher than comparable rural areas in Tennessee. Keller's thesis advisor, Dr. Margaret Chen, found these statistics compelling enough to warrant deeper investigation. But before Keller could expand his research, he received a visit from 2 individuals identifying themselves as representatives of the Tennessee Historical Commission. According to Dr. Chen's later statement, these individuals informed Keller that his research touched on matters of state security concern and strongly advised him to select a different thesis topic. Keller complied, abandoning his research on the Harper case. He completed his degree with a thesis on agricultural practices in East Tennessee. He never returned to the subject and declined all subsequent interviews about the incident. The Harper case might have remained a forgotten historical curiosity, sealed away in restricted archives and academic footnotes, were it not for a series of incidents beginning in 1983 that forced contemporary authorities to confront the possibility that whatever occurred in 1869 had not been resolved by the demolition of the house. The first documented incident occurred on March 7, 1983, when Park Ranger Thomas Waverly of the Cherokee National Forest filed an unusual report with the Tennessee Wildlife Resources Agency. According to documents obtained through public records requests in 2004, Waverly reported encountering a group of hikers approximately 2 miles from the former Harper property site who appeared to be in severe psychological distress. Waverly's report states that he came upon 3 hikers, 2 men and 1 woman, who were arguing intensely about which direction to walk. When he approached to offer assistance, all 3 turned to him simultaneously and, according to his account, stared with expressions of complete terror, as if I were the most frightening thing they had ever seen. The hikers, later identified as Gregory Morton, David Sullivan, and Jennifer Reeves, all residents of Asheville, North Carolina, initially refused to communicate with Waverly. When he finally calmed them sufficiently to obtain coherent statements, all 3 insisted they had heard knocking sounds coming from underground while resting near an old stone foundation. They claimed the knocking had a rhythmic pattern that seemed to be moving closer to the surface. More disturbingly, Jennifer Reeves told Waverly that she had seen a woman standing near the foundation dressed in clothing from the 19th century. According to the ranger's report, Reeves stated, "She was just standing there, not moving, staring at us. And then she smiled, and it was the most horrible thing I've ever seen. It wasn't a human smile. It was like she had forgotten how humans smile and was imitating it incorrectly." When Waverly investigated the location the hikers described, He found the overgrown remains of a stone foundation, which county records later confirmed was the Harper property site. He reported finding no evidence of any other person in the immediate vicinity and attributed the hikers' experience to possible dehydration or altitude sickness. However, Waverly's own experience at the site gave him pause. In a supplementary report filed 3 days later, he noted, "Upon visiting the location in question, I experienced an unusual sensation of being watched. The forest in that immediate area is notably quiet, with no bird calls or animal sounds, which is atypical for that habitat. I recommend marking this location on patrol maps and avoiding unnecessary stops in the vicinity." The Tennessee Wildlife Resources Agency took no action on this recommendation, and the incident was filed as an isolated event involving confused hikers. The 3 individuals involved returned to North Carolina and declined follow-up interviews. The second significant incident occurred in October 1987 and involved members of a local high school. According to police reports from the Carter County Sheriff's Department, 5 teenagers ventured to the Harper site on the night of October 31, drawn by local legends about the property being haunted. The group included Mark Patterson, age 17, Lisa Henderson, age 16, Robert Mallister, age 17, Jennifer Yates, age 16, and Thomas Bishop, age 16. According to statements given to Sheriff's Deputy Carl Morrison on November 1, 1987, the teenagers arrived at the site around 10 in the evening. They had brought flashlights and a portable radio. Mark Patterson's statement describes their initial exploration. "The foundation was barely visible under all the brush. We were mostly just goofing around trying to scare each other. But then Lisa said she heard something underground, like someone was knocking on a door from underneath us. The group initially dismissed this as imagination, but then Robert Mallister reported hearing it as well. According to his statement, it was definitely knocking. 3 knocks, then silence, then 3 more knocks. It kept repeating. We all heard it eventually, and it was getting louder, like whatever was making the sound was getting closer to the surface." The teenagers decided to leave, but as they attempted to exit the overgrown foundation area, they became disoriented. All 5 statements described similar confusion about which direction led back to their vehicle. Jennifer Yates stated, "We walked in what should have been a straight line back to the car, but we kept ending up back at the foundation. It happened 3 times. We started panicking because nothing made sense. The trees looked different each time, but we kept ending up in the same spot. Eventually, the group broke through the confusion and reached their vehicle. However, upon arriving home, all 5 teenagers reported feeling ill. Mark Patterson was treated at a local emergency room for symptoms described as severe anxiety and disorientation. Medical records from Sycamore Shoals Hospital, obtained with patient consent in 2002, indicate that Patterson's vital signs were normal, but that he exhibited symptoms consistent with extreme psychological trauma. More troubling were reports that emerged in the following weeks. According to a follow-up police report filed on November 15, 1987, 3 of the 5 teenagers reported experiencing recurring nightmares, in which they saw a woman in old-fashioned clothing standing at the foot of their beds. The descriptions they provided of this woman matched historical photographs of Lydia Harper. Lisa Henderson's parents reported to authorities that their daughter had begun speaking in her sleep, repeating phrases in what sounded like foreign languages. They recorded one such episode on November 10, 1987. The tape, provided to local police and later analyzed by linguistics experts at East Tennessee State University, contains speech patterns that Dr. Arnold Weiss, professor of linguistics, described as resembling corrupted medieval German. though the speaker clearly has no conscious knowledge of the language. The Carter County Sheriff's Department responded to these incidents by erecting additional no trespassing signs at the Harper site and increasing patrols in the area. Deputy Morrison filed a recommendation that the site be declared permanently off-limits and that vegetative cover be maintained to obscure the foundation. This recommendation was implemented in January 1988. The most extensively documented contemporary incident occurred in June 1995 and involved professional investigators rather than casual visitors. The case came to public attention through a leaked report that appeared on early internet forums dedicated to paranormal phenomena. Dr. Elizabeth Marsh, a psychologist specializing in trauma, and her colleague, investigator Raymond Torres, received permission from county authorities to conduct what they described as a historical documentation project at the Harper site. According to their proposal, reviewed by the County Commission on April 12, 1995, they intended to spend 3 days conducting environmental surveys and documenting the site's historical significance. Their actual intention, revealed in materials later published online, was to investigate paranormal claims associated with the location. Dr. Marsh and Torres arrived at the site on June 15, 1995, equipped with video cameras, audio recording equipment, and various instruments purportedly designed to detect electromagnetic anomalies. The video footage from their investigation, approximately 6 hours in total, was uploaded to the internet in segments beginning in 1997 by an anonymous source. The footage has been analyzed extensively by both believers and skeptics, with no consensus about its authenticity. The first 2 hours of footage show routine documentation work. Dr. Marsh and Torres examine the overgrown foundation, take measurements, and record observations about the site's condition. The audio is clear, and both investigators maintain professional demeanors. At approximately the 2-hour mark, Torres directs his camera toward the foundation center and comments, "Elizabeth, look at this. The vegetation pattern is unusual here. There's a perfect circle, maybe 15 feet in diameter, where the growth is noticeably less dense than the surrounding area." Dr. Marsh's response is recorded. That could indicate differences in soil composition or perhaps residual effects from the concrete fill. Make sure you're getting clear footage of the boundary. The investigators spent the next hour focusing on this circular area. At several points, their electromagnetic detection equipment produces readings that Torres describes as anomalous. However, skeptical analysis of the footage has noted that these readings could be explained by underground metal debris or natural geological features. The footage becomes more controversial at approximately the 4-hour mark. Both investigators report hearing sounds they describe as knocking coming from underground. The audio on the recording does capture rhythmic sounds, though their source and nature remain disputed. Dr. Marsh states, "That is definitely not a natural sound. It has a pattern. 3 knocks, pause, 3 knocks. And it seems to be responding to our presence. When we move, it stops. When we're still, it starts again." Torres attempts to locate the source of the knocking by placing his microphone against various points on the ground. On the recording, the knocking does appear to grow louder in certain locations, specifically near the center of the circular area Dr. Marsh had identified. At approximately 5 hours into the recording, the footage becomes more difficult to interpret. Dr. Marsh and Torres both report feeling suddenly disoriented. The camera work becomes shaky and unfocused. Torres can be heard saying, "Which way did we come in? Elizabeth, which way is the car? Nothing looks right. These trees. I don't remember these trees being here." The disorientation appears genuine on the footage, with both investigators moving in confused patterns and repeatedly checking compass readings that they insist are inconsistent Doctor. Marsh's voice carries increasing alarms. This doesn't make sense. We're walking north. The compass confirms it, but we keep ending up back at the foundation. That's not possible, unless the compass is malfunctioning. Ray, check your compass. Torres confirms that his compass shows the same readings. Both investigators then make a decision to abandon their equipment and walk in a straight line away from the foundation, using trees as visual markers to ensure they don't circle back. The final 20 minutes of footage show this attempt, which eventually succeeds in leading them back to their vehicle. However, the most controversial segment of the footage occurs in the final minutes, as Dr. Marsh and Torres are leaving the immediate area. The camera, which Torres has pointed backward to capture footage of their departure, apparently records a figure standing near the foundation. The figure appears for approximately 3 seconds in the distance before the camera pans away. Frame-by-frame analysis of this segment, conducted by numerous individuals since the footage appeared online, shows what appears to be a woman in dark clothing standing motionless among the trees. The resolution is insufficient to determine details, and the figure could plausibly be a tree trunk or shadow. However, the shape and positioning are consistent with a human form. Dr. Marsh and Torres did not report seeing this figure at the time. When the footage was later reviewed, they acknowledged that the shape resembles a person, but could not confirm definitively that they had recorded another individual at the site. More significant is what happened to Dr. Marsh and Torres after their investigation. According to interviews conducted by paranormal researchers in 1998 and 1999, both investigators reported experiencing persistent nightmares following their visit to the Harper site. Dr. Marsh described dreaming repeatedly of being underground in a stone chamber, unable to find an exit while hearing voices speaking in languages she didn't understand. Torres reported more disturbing experiences. In a 1999 interview posted on the website Unexplained Mysteries, he stated, "For months after we visited that site, I would wake up with dirt under my fingernails. I live in an apartment building. There's no explanation for where the dirt was coming from, and it wasn't regular dirt. I had it analyzed. The composition matched soil samples from East Tennessee, specifically from limestone regions. I'm in Arizona. There's no limestone here." Both investigators eventually ceased discussing their experiences publicly. Dr. Marsh closed her practice in 2001 and relocated to an undisclosed location. Torres deleted all online content related to the Harper case in 2002 and refused subsequent interview requests. The most recent documented incident at the Harper site occurred in September 2018. A survey crew from the Tennessee Department of Transportation, conducting preliminary work for a proposed road expansion, included the area of the former Harper property in their assessment. According to the crew supervisor's report filed with TDOT on September 24, 2018, and obtained through open records requests in 2020, the three-person survey team experienced equipment malfunctions when working near the site. GPS devices provided inconsistent readings. Electronic measuring equipment produced errors. Most significantly, ground-penetrating radar equipment used to assess subsurface conditions produced readings that the supervisor described as impossible and inconsistent with known geology. The GPR readings attached to the report show what appears to be a large void space approximately 20 feet below the surface, directly beneath the former location of the Harper root cellar. This contradicts county records indicating that the cellar was filled with concrete and rubble in 1972. The void space appears on the GPR readings as a chamber roughly 30 feet in diameter and 12 feet in height. The supervisor recommended further investigation of this anomaly before proceeding with road work. However, The project was ultimately canceled for budgetary reasons unrelated to the survey findings, and no follow-up investigation was conducted. In October 2018, the area was designated as protected wetlands by the Tennessee Department of Environment and Conservation, effectively preventing any future development or disturbance of the site. This designation was unusual, as the area does not meet typical criteria for wetland classification. Environmental records show minimal surface water and vegetation inconsistent with wetland ecology. Local historians and researchers familiar with the Harper case have noted the timing and nature of this designation with suspicion, suggesting it represents another attempt by authorities to restrict access to the site. Official explanations cite drainage patterns and seasonal flooding, but no public documentation supports these claims. As of 2024, the former Harper property remains inaccessible to the public, surrounded by dense forest and posted with multiple warning signs citing environmental protection regulations. The Tennessee Historical Commission has refused requests to place a historical marker at the site, stating that insufficient documentation exists to verify the historical significance of the location. Yet the case continues to generate interest online, where leaked documents, amateur investigations, and witness testimonies circulate through forums and social media each October, particularly around the anniversary dates of the original incident and Dr. Thorne's disappearance. New posts appear from individuals claiming to have visited the site or experienced related phenomena. Most of these accounts are likely fabrications or misinterpretations of natural events. However, a few contain details that align with historical records not available in public sources, suggesting that some individuals may indeed be visiting the restricted site and encountering something unexplained. The pattern that emerges from 150 years of incidents is consistent. Individuals who visit the Harper site report hearing underground knocking, experience spatial disorientation, and sometimes glimpse a figure resembling descriptions of Lydia Harper. Those who spend significant time at the location or investigate it seriously tend to experience long-term psychological effects. And a disturbing number of serious investigators have disappeared or died under questionable circumstances. On October 12, 1869, 23 people gathered at a limestone farmhouse in the Tennessee hills for what they believed would be a simple evening of prayer and fellowship. By October 14, 14 of them had vanished without a trace, disappeared into circumstances that have defied explanation for over 150 years. The official investigation concluded with bureaucratic silence and deliberate suppression of evidence. The Harper house was eventually demolished, the site sealed and restricted. Authorities across multiple generations have acted as if the case could be erased through determined forgetting, but the evidence suggests otherwise. The pattern of incidents spanning 1869 to the present day indicates that whatever Lydia Harper initiated in that root cellar was not concluded by her disappearance. The void space detected by ground-penetrating radar in 2018 suggests that something remains beneath the surface. Despite official claims that the site was permanently sealed decades ago, the recurring reports of spatial disorientation, the mysterious figure witnessed by multiple independent observers, the underground knocking heard across generations, all point toward a phenomenon that remains active. The disappearances of serious investigators, from Dr. Thorne in 1969 to Dr. Morrison in 1972, suggest that proximity to the truth carries genuine danger. Documents preserved in restricted archives describe rituals intended to open doorways between realms. Survivor testimonies speak of boundaries growing thin. Modern witnesses report sensations of wrongness, of spaces that exist slightly outside normal reality. If you find yourself hiking in the Cherokee National Forest, Particularly in areas northeast of Elizabethton, pay attention to unusual silence. No bird song, no insect sounds. Ground that feels hollow beneath your feet. And if you hear rhythmic knocking coming from underground, 3 beats followed by a pause. Do not investigate. Do not remain in the area. Mark your trail carefully, because the disorientation reported by witnesses is real, consistent, and dangerous. 14 people entered the Harper threshold in 1869. They never emerged. The threshold remains open. And Lydia Harper may still be waiting for those foolish enough to answer when she knocks.